Welcome to Thrive Masters, where we reverse engineer action-taking impact makers. Today, we have Jason Sisneros, who's an entrepreneur, a speaker, a philanthropist, and a mentor. Jason is a powerful influencer and thought leader who has used his success and influence to feed millions around the world, fight for abused women, and rescue underage sex slaves. Jason, welcome.
Thanks for having me, brother. Good to be here.
I appreciate it. Now, I've introduced you from my perspective, from the outside perspective. How would you describe yourself?
Oh, man. I don't spend much time thinking about myself, so that's a great question. So I would say, that's a great encapsulation and summary of the things I do. I have really three. My background is that I was adopted when I was really young by a guy he married my mom. Not a very good guy at all. And ultimately broke my nose over a dozen times, put my mom in the hospital a few times, and he was in and out of jail. And by the time I was 17, he finally went to prison for attempted murder of me and my mom for good. And then from that point, it was basically like a lot of your listeners and a lot of people that watch your show, there's always this day where you're like, okay, I have to start designing my own life. Well, what we start out with, those building blocks that we start out with, are the building blocks that we were taught when we were younger as our only tool, really. And so what I did was, I dealt drugs. I was very good at fighting. I'd been fighting an adult male my entire life, since I was 6. And so I got very good at collecting money, fighting, those kind of things. And then my first child was born. And in that same week, I got stabbed in the chest and shot in the leg. And it was interesting because when I would get beat up really bad, where my face was kind of unrecognizable, my adopted father would lock me in my room, and my grandma always made sure that I had a Bible. And I'm not an overly religious guy, but when you're in there, all I had to read was the Bible, and I read it 15, 16 times, and not as a religious book, but more of a series of stories. And I remember really clearly, as soon as the knife hit my chest, that I remembered one thing, and it was the sins of the father born unto the children, right? And it just popped into my head, and I thought, okay, if I survive this, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to go do something different with my life. And so that's kind of what happened. That was the beginning, right? This is content for your listeners, not necessarily in my own story, is that there's a day when we decide that our lives are meant for more, right? That all of that stuff that happened to us now can be used, and especially in this tumultuous time, right, where you've got racial issues and you've got COVID and you've got all of these different things, and people are at each other, man. That you see really two sides: people that have accepted their own responsibility in their own lives, and then the people who have decided to be bitter and to take those things and to really, like, I could look at several different things that happened and have had that enter my spirit and cause and feed darkness. But luckily I had my grandmother, my grandfather, my mom, mentors like Tony Robbins and Keith Cunningham, who's the rich dad out of the Rich Dad Poor Dad books, and Jay Abraham, and and my football coaches, and just right, like people that sometimes we overlook as we're traveling this thing called life, as these people that pop in that are saying, okay, if you want to come over to the light, here's what you need to do, right? You need to do this or do this. And that message, each and every one of my mentors, it kept stacking, because I wanted to be a good father. I wanted to be a good husband. I really wanted to be like the stories that I read in the Bible and the books that I was reading when I was locked up in my room. I wanted to be that sort of superhero that was a force for good in the world. And, and I know everybody that's watching can identify with that, because we've felt that. I guess the only place that I would say now might be a good time to question is, have you chosen to be more bitter, or have you chosen to take those things and transform them into something that made you, that was your backstory for your superhero journey? And if this is the day, this is the message, this is the show that offers you that opportunity, I'm telling you, take it, because it's way more powerful to live. You know, obviously we all have light and dark in us, but it's way better of an experience, even through the travails. It doesn't make life any easier, right? It just makes the outcome worth it, as opposed to continually getting worse and worse. And we know by, you know, drinking or drugs or food or sex or distraction of any kind, what path we're on. Because when you're chasing the light, baby, it's its own high. So that led me to starting to change my life. Nothing spectacular happened, except for I just went from a life of crime into, you know, peeling logs, hand peeling logs for building cabins for $6 an hour, digging out a sump for my then father-in-law at a mine, you know, 300 feet below the ground. And then I decided I needed to learn a trade, started laying carpet, then bought my first company, my first carpet store, and went bankrupt. Then had an insurance, or a real estate insurance mortgage company. Then I bankrupted a gym. Like this was the beginning, right? And it's marked, I say these things, it's marked by failure, but also in failure is embedded in it was learning. And those things now, as I look back, I didn't graduate from high school. You know, I eventually went back and got my degree, or my high school diploma. Never spent a day in college, but I fell in love with books and education. And I also looked at my failures as a really great opportunity to learn. And now I have, you know, my company, Anton J Global, is had two sides to it. One where I was buying companies, keeping them for cash flow, and the other side is a consulting company, teaching those strategies from a practical application, not a theoretical that you see on the internet. It was practical application type thing. And I have, you know, Harvard grads, Yale grads, Wharton School of Business. You know, these are my clients now that hire little old me, you know, from all of that failure to help them with their companies, because I learned, and I could see things now. And then I went out and got the education from Tony Robbins and Keith Cunningham, and you know, follow Harvard Business School and these types of things, to be able to formulate what I was doing that was successful, so that we could then train that into companies. Now, the last piece of this, and then because I don't want to talk the entire show for you, but what that led into was, as I made my money, everybody inside of us, right? We go from transformation from when we're living someone else's life to living our own life. And then we get to a place where we're okay ourselves, and we know we're meant for more. That more is service. You know, that more is, you know, laying your time and your treasure on the table for a purpose bigger than yourself. And I learned that, you know, fairly about, I guess it's been over a decade ago. And when I started working with domestic violence and just started writing checks, you know, little tiny things that I could do. And then I got more involved and then I got passionate. I'm like, man, I can really make a difference. So I started writing bigger checks, and then I was taking more time, and I got invited to go do a mission to go rescue some little girls that were being trafficked in Haiti. And that was my first mission ever. With Tony Robbins was on that mission. You know, if you can imagine Tony Robbins undercover, you know, it was crazy. But you know, and that really transformed another level of my life to say, this is all I want to do. All I want to do is I want to serve. I want to rescue little girls and little boys that have been taken, nobody's looking for. The ones that are being looked for. I want to help domestic violence, because those women are prisoners in their own home. I watched it happen with my own mom. Feed a Billion. I'm chairman of Feed a Billion right now, which, you know, we help, that money goes to here in the US, to the work Tony does. And then we help people in Africa and also India. And then I started thinking, well, I can't finance this whole thing myself. This is a multi-billion-dollar problem if we're going to actually address these things. So we started the consulting company, to train good people, help good people make more money, get more time so they can do more good. And how we do that is if somebody wants our help to structure their company or get better, I look, you know, one of the processes that we do is we go through their financials before we start working with them. And in there, if we see, I don't care if it's to a local tuba, right? Or cancer, it doesn't have to be anything I'm passionate about. It just has to show the content of your character that in small things you give, because then I know that in large things you will as well. So we have a lot of people that want to work with us that, you know, want another Ferrari, and I don't hold anybody's success against them at all. I'm not a judge person like that, but we do help companies that have a passion and a heart to grow their profits and their businesses, not only for them, their family, their own security, their employees' security in their lives, but also to do something bigger in the world. And so that's what I spend my time doing, man. We, you know, have a company of trained ninjas on my strategies and tactics. And then most of the time I'm on a rescue. I mean, we've tried to do the show multiple times and I get a call, we got a rescue, or we've got a domestic violence situation or something. And that's what my life is spent doing now, is serving. And it couldn't have started without all of my failure and all of my personal pain and my personal experience. So it was God's way of building me into the machine that he needed, to be able to, you know, to be able to serve.
So I've seen it come full circle with this Anton J, and how companies, there's this prerequisite that they need to have shown that, you know, that they're caring for you to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
Is that throughout all the companies that you're dealing with, or is this just with Anton J?
Well, so I'm blessed. I sold a chunk of most of my companies, all but 3 of them last year, and exited. It was a very nice exit. And so I really do focus now on building the BALD Avenger brand, which is a podcast, the BALD Avenger Show. And then Anton J on the consulting side. And then I've got some other projects. It's like 4 or 5 companies under one umbrella in the healing world, supplements and different things of that nature that, it really helps, especially like, in COVID, right? Part of the thing is that you don't have a problem with it unless you have an underlying issue. And so most of those underlying issues that they talk about are things that we have control over: our weight, diabetes, heart conditions. A lot of those things are controllable by us. So that's another area where I focus as well. But all of them are tied into service of some sort.
Yeah, the only person I know in my circle that has actually passed away is a 21-year-old lady, but she was very overweight.
Yes. It attacks weakness, brother. And I mean, it's interesting where, they say that our species has survived is the survival of the fittest, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's gotten to a place where we've gotten so soft as a society that we've forgotten, because there's always a pill, right? There's always a pill for this or that or the other, when we really should just be looking at our diet and drinking healthy water and walking, working out, doing something that we're passionate about, reading, feeding our mind, and being joy-filled, instead of this really awkward, selfish phase that we've gotten into as a society, that it's all about me all the time. And this disease that's floating around the world is it attacks those weaknesses. And I find it very, very fascinating that it can be applied across the board to our lack of discipline in our own lives.
it's showing up.
It's
I made a
showing.
post recently that COVID or any disease doesn't really care about your feelings. It doesn't care, you know, the people talk about don't fat shame. I'm not into that, but I think we need to make health a priority and not kind of be afraid of speaking up about it.
Yeah,
Because that's going to be,
it doesn't care. I mean, no disease does. Cancer kills people at a much higher rate than COVID ever will. Heart disease, 1 in 5 people, right? You had tuberculosis that was floating around. That was 1.5 million people died last year. You didn't hear a peep about it, right? Over 1 billion people were infected. You know, so it's not, you know, this world's not going to get less harsh. You know, it's not, and you can't invent a pill for everything that comes along. So you want your immune system and your mindset and your life to reflect discipline before you need it, right? A lot of the companies that we help have survived, not just survived, but thrived through the COVID shutdowns because they had our processes, our procedures. They're able to react to marketplace things that happened. Plus, one of the first things I tell people is have a year's worth of living expenses in your bank account for you and your family, and then have a year's worth of operating expenses for your business, right? Before you ever do anything, before you buy that new truck, before you upgrade your home, before you get a fancy suit, before you go on that vacation, just put your time in to build some strength and distance between you and things like this will happen. And a lot of the companies and a lot of my friends and a lot of people that know me, I'm a prepper, what they call a prepper. So I have property, I have weapons, I have more rounds than I should say online. I have, you know, food, freeze-dried food. I have been building out, you know, a defense against something like this. Nobody knew it was going to be COVID, right? Luckily, I don't think that this is going to be the thing that tanks the world economy. But it doesn't mean it shouldn't be a wake-up call to all your listeners to make sure that you've got a year's worth of distance at least between you and the worst case scenario, right? Have a little gold, have a little silver, have some freeze-dried food, have a water source, have, you know, these types of things. And so as I live my life that way, that's how I train, you know, these companies and the companies that we work with, small, medium, large type organizations, and they've done really well. There's been a couple of them that one guy was selling cars and he started making those spit shields that you see literally everywhere, crushing it, right? And on and on. I could go story through story about the companies that we've worked with that are doing really, really well now.
Now I have a question regarding, you know, the challenging times we have now, because I'm sure you've probably gone through the financial challenges, 2007, 2008. So the question is about pivoting or doubling down on certain actions, because you already mentioned, you know, having, you know, the 1 year for your personal, 1 year for your company. That's kind of like the fundamentals. Is there any pivots that you have made yourself or you've doubled down on?
Yeah, it's, you know, I guess that what you're looking for there is some advice on what's coming, right? And how to prepare for it. I haven't done anything differently because I always optimize my companies for cash flow, right? And they're always optimized for marketplace disruptions of any kind. Could be 9/11, could have been H1N1, could have been swine flu, could have been, you know, COVID, doesn't matter. There's always consistently, weirdly, it follows along election years, but that's a whole other subject. But at the end of the day, the idea is just to build whatever it is that you have in a way that is sustainable and yet nimble and flexible, right? Used to be the average company on the stock market was there for 73 years. It's now down to 15 years. So even the biggest companies that you see on there right now may be gone. Apple might be gone. Microsoft might be gone. Amazon might be gone. It's unfathomable to us to think about that idea, but it happens. That's a transition with technology, with speed, with knowledge. And so right now is the best time for people to understand the underlying fundamentals of business. And I'm telling you, way too much time is spent on how to sell and social media marketing and marketing budgets and websites and all that other stuff. It's the very last thing that you should be worried about. You know, obviously the big lie that's out there is cash covers all sins, right? Well, when you're covering sins, the sin's not being dealt with. So it will eventually come back to bite you. And that's what you saw with a lot of companies. They're 40% of the companies that were out there, they're out of business. They're gone. Small businesses, they're gone. They're never coming back, which in 10 years, 96% fail anyway, right? So really what people need to be focused on is that underlying, understand business at its core. And then you can build your operations, you can build your culture, you can understand finances, you can build sales and marketing on top of it. But most people are running around out there and they don't have the fundamentals down. They don't understand the working parts, the interconnectedness, the incremental progress nature of a well-built business. And so, you know, that's why we have the consulting company. My company, it took them 3 years to convince me to build a digital product. So we called it, you know, it's a 12-week course and 12-session master class, really, called Growth: How to Master Your Business G-Spot, right? Because I like to be controversial. So your G-Spot is the growth of your organization. And that has been helping hundreds of other companies that I never would have been able to touch or talk to, because they couldn't get to us. Because, you know, when you bring us into an organization, it's cost prohibitive to a small single owner business. But now we've got startups and, you know, and so that leads into what we're doing now, which is we've got the Slave Free Project to free all slaves. There's, you know, 10 million children enslaved today. There's 20 to 30 million adults that are enslaved today. And, you know, most of them are of the Asian culture. You know, they're being used, Hispanics to build. And, you know, again, this Kaepernick thing, his house and his Bugatti and all the stuff, the pictures that you see him in, all of that stuff was built off slave labor. And yet, you know, it's a hypocrisy, right?
Yeah, because there's slaves going on in modern day.
It's modern day slavery, and he's benefiting from it. He's not playing football, and when he was playing football, he wasn't that great, right? But now he's literally profiting off the backs of real live, today alive slaves. And you know, so we're really focused on rebuilding the middle class. And we've got a project. I've got a couple of names that I've picked. We're just going through the process of which one, you know, all the laws and stuff behind it. But it's a project to rebuild the middle class. And that process, you know, Henry Ford was really the founder of our middle class in this country. And he had one simple thought. It was ethical capitalism, right? Which was that my employees, if I paid them more, they might be able to actually afford the thing that we're actually making. And that was the birth, you know, and this controversial of who started, but I credit very heavily Henry Ford for that. And so you used to be able, you built the middle class by the tops, the CEOs, the people at the top of the organization, executing on ethical capitalism, which meant how much is enough for us? I mean, you know, and I know that a modern day version of that was Costco. I don't know if it still is, but years ago when I did the research on the organization, there was a cap on the CEO. There was a cap on what they could make. And then everybody benefited from all the way top to bottom when the company did really well, right? And that's ethical capitalism. Well, now you've got somebody like, you know, the guy that Bezos, right? Bezos is worth $180 billion. When's enough, brother? You know? And he's also operating off of some slave labor, plus even here in the US, like $9.50 an hour. But he's got these people surrounded by technology, and he's watching them work for what purposes? It's too expensive for Chinese labor, or for Japanese, or for Taiwanese, or for Hispanics, or whatever it is. That's even too expensive for them. They want to make more profit by turning that $9 an hour employee into a robot that never tires, never has to sleep, never takes vacation, never gets pregnant, never does all these things. so that they can make more profit. At what point do you now destroy your base of customers because none of them have jobs?
Yeah.
So there's got to be some bringing back of that. And I'm a capitalist, but I like to look at myself like I'm an ethical capitalist, where the people that in my companies, they always succeed if the company is succeeding, because it just makes sense to me, right? And it's gotten wildly out of control with these billionaires, and then they want to get in politics, and now they think money makes them smarter than the rest of us. All we did was birth a new elite. That's all we did, right? And so they think that there's an
elite on steroids.
It's on steroids, right? And at the end of the day, now you have the separation is not really racial. It's more poverty based. You know, it's the poor against the rich. And man, if people could just read a history book, they would figure it out that this is something that we can nip in the bud now, before it gets to a place where there's a revolutionary war or mass death or whatever to shrink that gap. It's what it's always been about. You know, when your poor are doing well, your middle class is doing well, and your rich are doing well. I think that there's always going to be that kind of a hierarchy, but it's gotten out of control. So we need to rebuild the middle class. And those are the two things. I want to end slavery, and I want to rebuild the middle class. So a couple of small projects I'm taking on.
I can see the full circle with your story of caring for the vulnerable, and then all the way on the other side of ethical capitalism is playing into that. So my question is, how important is for us to know our own story and really own it? Like, if you have a challenging childhood, if you have a traumatic experience, is that something that you think is very important that people?
It's crucial. And let me tell you the crucial parts of your story, right? A lot of people are out there, and I've been doing a lot. I've been invited on a lot of, all black panels, for instance, and because of my light skin or whatever it was, and I'm very outspoken in my views. But people, I believe, have a respect for me because I'm not, I don't have an agenda. My agenda is love. My agenda is to ease suffering, right? And that's all it is. So I don't go in with, it's black against white, it's gays against straights, it's, Republicans against Democrats. I don't care about any of that crap. What I care about is leaving this world a better place for my children, my grandchildren, your grandchildren, everybody who's watching us. We have an integral responsibility that was passed on from our ancestors who died and for the sacrifice for us to live in the world that we now do. And so one of the things that I noticed was, as I was on these shows and got to be friends with a lot of the different people that had brought me on their shows, and we've started to see things through their eyes. I'll never understand what it's like to be black. They'll never understand what it's like to be me. I'll never understand what it's like to be them. That's not the necessary outcome. The necessary outcome is that we don't even have to like each other, to be honest with you, right? You can't legislate the content of someone's heart. We just saw that with Nick Cannon, right? Where somebody that I've admired my entire life, his backstory, what he was doing, and to see him in a podcast much like this, consciously choosing the words. It wasn't an anger. It was how he felt, right? And so you see these things where you don't have to like each other, but you also don't have to step on each other's, the right to pursue happiness, right? Is the right for you to do your thing and for me to do mine.
Absolutely.
And embedded in that is, an equality of production, an equality of performance. And a lot of times people they don't want to do the work, but they want the outcome, and they look at that as unfair. When you do the work and you get the outcome, and there's no prejudice or, inherent systemic problem embedded in that, you win or you lose. It's the pursuit of happiness, not the guarantee of happiness. And everybody that's watching this can right now choose to be happy. Well, Jason, you don't know this, you don't know that. I don't care. Look, there was a day when I would listen to that BS, but I've been around the world. I've been in 62 countries. I've been in prisons. I've been with rape victims. I've pulled, you know, little girls that are chained to beds out of captivity. And I've just seen it all. And what happens is you can go back to the fundamentals of what, you know, I'm trying to think of it. It's Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, right?
That's right.
And you can go back to that book and it can summarize in one sentence. He said he had his life ripped away from him. He was put into prison. He was beaten. He was starved. He watched his friends died and murdered and tortured in front of him. And he never knew when the next minute was going to be his last. And he wrote one line in the entire book. Read the book, but there was one line that said, "I am more free than my captors," which said to me that everything that happens to me or for me is my reaction is a choice of my choosing. You can beat me. Doesn't mean that you're going to stop me from smiling. You know, you might make me cry out in pain. You might steal my job. You might steal my opportunity. You might, you know, harm something in my life that I care about, whatever it is, but you can't own what's in here. You can't own what's in here. And these two things are eternal. So you can't have them, right?
That's empowering.
It's very empowering, and everybody has that choice. And sometimes we haven't heard it, right? Or we haven't heard it couched in this way. We just say, whoa, you got to be ultimately positive. Look, positive mental thinking is bullshit. It's activity, it's action, it's knowing what you want out of this life. Even if that thing, you can't dream big enough for you to get beyond, I need to have a car, Jason, to get to work. That's your dream for right now. Right. And then when you get that car, then it's a house to put over your head. And then it's da 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 da. And every success story follows the principles of performance. And embedded in performance is the choice that I have to believe. Then I have to discipline myself. I have to change my language. I have to change the way I dress. I have to change the way that I address the world so that I can play by its rules long enough so I can start writing the rules for myself, which is exactly what I do today. Right? I have the freedom because financially I put distance between the times when my mom and I were standing in line for government cheese and government milk and all that kind of crap. And where we would have to go walk the country roads for asparagus to eat that night, and to see the embarrassment on her face when she paid with, you know, the old school, what do you call them? Food stamps, right? Mm-hmm. And to watch her being beaten by my dad, but to never see her spirit beat, and to never have her transfer that pain onto her children. Jason, you can grow up. I think you're going to be a doctor. I think you're going to, you know, my brother, blah, 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 blah. My brother who ended up in prison because of his choices, and me who's ended up with what I've ended up because of my choices. It boils down to our choices. And anybody that's telling you any different, there's no reparations that's going to fill the hole in your spirit. There's no free government giveaway that's going to close the gap between what God meant you to be and your outcomes and your power and what you were uniquely brought on this earth to do, and where you are, and the words you need to do, and the books you need to read, and the failures you need to go through, and that I'm sorry's, and the successes, and all of that stuff to be able to reach that pinnacle of who you are is never going to be given to you. You have to take it. Mm-hmm. And it's nobody else's responsibility than yours. And anytime you think that it's up to somebody else to fix a pain in your life, it is now they own you.
That's right.
You are now a slave to whoever you believe is going to fix your problem for you.
Yeah. Wow. Your passion is coming through, man. I know you said you don't really like to talk about what you're doing specifically, but rather about the impact that your companies are making and the service that you're doing. But let's go back. Was there a moment where things started to align for you? Was there a decisive moment that you can share?
And I want everybody to hear this, because we all think, oh, there's this great epiphany, right? There's this great aha moment for us, and we're kind of waiting for it. Well, those moments come in a conversation. Those moments come in a line in a book that you're halfway through that you hated. those moments come when there's an opportunity for you to say, I'm sorry, or I love you, or forgive me. It's a series of things that your mind first has to be set on doing what's right all the time. Because I'm telling you, and I want everybody to hear me, I mean, I'm covered in tattoos and scars, and I've made mistakes. I've lost people's money. I've failed at businesses. I've cheated in my marriage. Every mistake that you could possibly do, addicted to drugs, addicted to alcohol, all of the stuff, the mistakes that you can make that were of my own choosing that I tried to blame on other people, I've made them. But there was always my grandma in my head saying, baby, you are capable of anything, right? And that's really, I think if I could say, if I could say, what is the one takeaway that everybody should take from the show is, baby, you are capable of everything. You are capable of anything that you set your mind to. And you got to change the people you're hanging out with. You got to change the content that you're allowing to absorb in between your ears. You've got to change your heart to become full of grace and love and forgiveness instead of bitterness and judgment and fear, right? These are the little things. So when you say, there's been 100,000 moments, right? But it's always pulled me towards, I'm better than this, I'm better than how I'm showing up. I'm better than the person that I'm showing up as, the results, my bank account, my body, my relationships, my personal joy. I'm better than this. And so that just leaves you open to saying, I don't know it all, right? There's always something next that I can learn. And I was a seeker, right? I became a seeker, a heat-seeking missile looking for the answer to my next problem, not to the biggest problem. Not to how am I going to be flying on jets and, doing all this stuff. Look, I was able to retire probably 9 or 10 years ago. I tried it and was bored to death. And it was that moment where I was like, okay, if I come back, if I start doing this stuff again, what do I want to do? And that's where charity, and being able to pull together through our event that we do once or twice a year called Unstoppable, where we bring companies that we've helped and that are there for information together with our charities. They fall in love with each other. And now you've got constant sources going to good, vetted by me, which you don't get a bigger critic than me, to become one of our charities that we support, like CERT Ministries, like A New Dawn in the domestic violence world, like Feed a Billion. Specifically in Feed a Billion, none of us that are executives or that run it, we don't take any money out. We never will. We have to pay for our own flights. We have to pay for our own food. We have to pay for our own rental cars. We have to pay everything. And we're committed to donating a certain amount per year if we want to be there for the privilege of doing it. Right. So
now, would you say that the Anton J does this company bring everything together for you as a fundamental space?
It does. On the business side of what we do, Anton J Global is all of it, right? I speak at, very high level on stages, pre-pandemic anyway, I've been on 150 freaking podcasts now since COVID started. And really I get brought on for two things, my early story and then also my business sense. And I always tie in the fact that you have to have service in your heart. If you're going to have the energy to build something worth building. And so yes, Anton J, everything that I do business-wise is tied into Anton J. And every company that's out there, I don't care who you are, how smart you think you are, there's always a way to improve what you're doing.
Now, the next question is, where did the name Anton J come from?
So that's a great question. I watched one of my heroes and one of my early mentors, Tony Robbins, and he built the Tony Robbins organization, Tony Robbins companies. And I see the struggle where if Tony's not there, it's not a Tony Robbins thing, even though he's trained some really great people along the way. One of your prior guests, could speak every word of everything that Tony can do. But, so I learned that lesson. I'm like, I don't want this company to be named Jason Sisneros. And at the time I was doing because I was adopted, I was doing some lineage when I found out who my real father was. And that kind of stuff. Found out I'm part Black. I'm mostly Spanish, part Native American, part Irish, part Italian, part, but all of these parts from a blood test I did. And I started digging through my history, and I found out that one of my great grandfathers 6 or 7 generations ago that came across here and was helping sort of formulate America was named Anton. And so that was the first name. And then I wanted my initial at least to be in it. So we started out with J, and I was doing some work over in China, Japan, and Korea. And JAE is a very good, it's good luck, basically, JAE. So I just kind of combined the two, and that's how it was born.
Now, having done your own lineage, has it given you some deeper perspective on your own life? Has it allowed you even to see this challenging time we have now, to see it for what it is?
Regardless of, because I look at my family and I go, to the blind eye, it's been drug dealers in and out of prison, jail, that kind of stuff. You dig far enough, you always find that one that survived long enough to keep coming to you, right? And so it was a sense of okay, now I kind of get where I come from. And then the deeper sense that even if I had somebody that really didn't do anything of note in history, they lived and produced me, right? And they lived through pandemics, they lived through wars, they lived through famines, they lived through all of the stuff that we think is unique to us right now because we're such a fucking selfish society. It's special to us, and it's not. It's called life. And if you're going to survive, you got to be strong. And so it gave me that perspective that it's my responsibility to leave a better setting, because for generations, hundreds of thousands of years, those generations have left it a bit better, right? Yeah, there's been some horrifying things, slavery, wars, different things. The first white slaves, or the first slaves that were white, owned by Middle Eastern and Africans. And then it kind of, it switched hands, and we forget all of that, right? When we start talking about reparations, I'm due some, because I have lineage that was, but at the end of the day, or we could just say that was part of that history, and I'm responsible for now, and I'm going to leave it better off for my children. And I think that would be a much better mindset for us to be living by.
That's a good perspective. So we've talked a little bit about your past, the day-to-day. What is serving you? What type of habits? What are you doing that's helping you out?
I'm a very habit-driven human being. My sleep is number one. I don't like, if it doesn't matter. Like if we go on a mission and I'm up till 6 o'clock in the morning, when I'm able to sleep, I will lay down and go to sleep for 8 hours, right? This thing that I have is measuring multiple things right now. It's called a whoop strap, and it measures my sleep, because without your sleep, all of the fundamental pieces of your health fall apart. So I'm monitoring my sleep at all times. Now, the quality of my sleep then tells me how much strain I can put out for the day, right? How much I recovered. It tells you recovery, and then that then can indicate how much strain you can put out. And it gives you a numerical basis to go by. And so I am constantly doing my best to get my best rest. And then that gives me my best recovery, which means I can put out my most energy, right? I do a show on Sundays, and the first time I had my whoop strap on it, I got done with the show, and it said, "Hey, that was a good workout. Why don't you capture what that was and reproduce it?" It was me sitting just like this for an hour. And I did, and that day I had done a very heavy leg day with my trainer, who kills me, by the way, right? And I put out more energy in my show than I did during that leg workout, right? So the habits are: wake up whatever time it is after having 7.5 to 8 hours of good sleep, dark room. I keep the temperature cool. I do everything that I possibly can to make sure that is uninterrupted. I stop drinking water so I don't wake up during the night to have to go to the bathroom. And then my food is also something that's very regimented. I have it made for me according to my macros. It's already done, so I don't have to think about it, right? Because that's what a lot of times we get in bad habits is McDonald's is right there, or the candy bar is right there, or the chips are right there. I have it all structured out for me. And then my supplementation that has been years of fine tuning. I now belong to this company called Euphoria that does DNA swabs, and then it puts the highest quality peer reviewed supplements together for you that are meant just for you. Wow. Very inexpensive. Actually saves me about $600 a month on the supplements that I used to take. There's that. I read, I meditate, I do breathing exercises, and then also I operate on this fundamental principle that I built out that has incremental progress built into it. And then every night before I go to bed, I do what's called a GBD. What was great about my day, because most people are going to bed with what I screwed up, what I didn't do, the mistakes I made, a conversation that you had that didn't go well. What was great about my day? And it forces your brain, which is about to go into a state of rest, and your subconscious doesn't stop working, right? So your subconscious is working on whatever it is that you go to sleep. If you go to sleep listening to the news, you're going to have terrible sleep, right? If you go to sleep thinking about the fight that you had, or the money that you lost, or the McDonald's that you ate, or whatever it is, it's going to poison your ability for your brain to work on something productive. Okay. So what was great about my day shifts me into that mode. Then I go into what could be better, because I don't ever want to be like, Ferrari's going to show up in my like The Secret, that kind of thing. So what could be better? That forces me to say, what are the actions that I could take to make tomorrow better? And then what will I do differently? So it's called GBD. What was great? What could be better? And what will I do differently? And that differently ends up on the calendar 2 weeks, a month, tomorrow, whenever it is, differently shows up for me to take action on it. And then I go to bed after 5 minutes of gratitude and just being grateful for my life. And so that's my systems, my processes. It's been cobbled together, and it helps me to operate at optimal levels at all times.
So that was great, better, and different.
Yes.
Okay, last two questions.
Yes.
Decade forward, 2030. Are you thinking that far? Do you have a vision for that? And then how would you go about, recommending somebody?
Yeah. So 10 years, look, there's a great book out there called Mastery by Robert Greene. Okay. And when you read that book, which I do 3 or 4 times a year, I'm obsessed with that book. And what you do is you learn about all of these great people that have written their name in history by their actions, right? And what you find out is that people overestimate what they can get done in a year, and they underestimate what they can get done in a decade. Right. I heard that first from Tony Robbins, and it's so true. And so when you say look 10 years forward, yes, I have. Yes, I do. But I plan 90-day chunks, and I measure every day, right? And I revisit every 7 days. So it's 1 day, 7 days, 90 days. And so then I know that 10-year plan, I'm being pulled towards it, because again, nobody could have predicted COVID. I had a whole other 2020 that was mapped out, right? As did everybody. But what it did was it said, okay, well, that 90-day plan, we need to shift it. And I changed it down into 7 days and then into 1 day. And then I just got back about my business of changing lives and being a powerful world changer that enjoys every breath, which is my fundamental belief, right? So 10 years out is great. It gives you a destination. I'd like this. I'd like that. I'd like this. But it's more about impact, right? I want to bring down the number. I would love to cut the number of trafficked children by half at least. I'd like to take Can you tell us where people can find more information about the traffic? Yes. So we're right in transition as of the shooting of this show, August 1st, we're going to be launching this project called the Slave Free Project. Right now, who I support and I go full time with right now is CERT, SERT. SERT, Search, Evangelize, Rescue, Train, CERT Ministries. And that is run by one of the most ethical families, the Gonzalez family, that I've ever met in my entire life. Not only
Can everyday people support this organization?
Yes, CERT Ministries on Facebook is the best way to find them. And then, you know, you can get to their website or, you know, all kinds of different things through Facebook. So that's the best way to go and find them. But pay attention for the Slave Free project. We're going to be staging a march. Right now, I'm working with the Attorney General and Sean Reyes in Utah to have a date for us to do a march for children in August, either the first weekend or the second weekend. And so bringing all of those, you know, again, for the metrics, I want for there not to every 11 minutes be somebody having to survive or get through domestic violence, right? Abused in their own home. I want to extend the time. Every 4 seconds, somebody dies of starvation, not hunger related issues, starvation, when we have enough food on the planet to feed everybody.
Absolutely.
I want there to be less than 22 suicides of our military every single day, right? There's these things, these metrics that we need to operate by. And if I could cut all of them in half in the next 10 years, that will have been something. I would love to end it along the way, maybe change the environment to such a way that we can start dealing with issues of import to large groups of people instead of you know, when we've been damaged or insulted or had little things happen to us. And I know they're not little, but in the grand scheme of things, they're not that big of a deal because they happened years ago and you're still alive, right? So be more globally focused. And I don't mean that by getting rid of borders. I just mean be globally focused as in all of the pain that people seek to avoid in their life is because they're too inwardly focused. All of it that exists right now is because they're focused on, oh my gosh, this, oh, I have this pain. Oh, am I going to pay my rent? It's all caused by inward reflection instead of who can I serve and be happy with what I have right now. All of your problems switch when you start focusing on other people. Yeah. So that's, you know, that's the next decade, man. I'm going to be working as hard as I can and, you know, lifting and keeping my body fit and my mind fit and serving other people at the highest level that I possibly can. And by the way, I'm not concerned with being canceled anymore because you can't cancel me anymore. I made my money, baby. I cashed my chips in. So, you know,
that's right.
It's a cool place to be.
Yes. So I want to support you on that big vision. I'm cheering for you and, you know, supporting all the people that are going to be affected by it. Now, the last question, this was supposed to be our first question, but you went into your story first. Does death play a role in helping you navigate life?
It's a really great question. Death has always been present and 6 inches in front of me my entire life. And so I have maybe a different relationship to it than a lot of people, but from the time that I can remembering, death was happening around me, pain, you know, those kind of things. And so I've always really, and even more recently, I'm not afraid of death. I haven't been afraid of death, but it has charged towards me that everybody dies and time is always charging towards us. And so I do my best to milk out everything. So yes, death is something everybody was like, oh, I don't think about it, or I'm not afraid of it, or whatever it is. That doesn't matter. It's not a matter of fear. It's just a matter of a relationship to something that is inevitable, right? And you don't know when it's going to happen. You know, there's people that went to bed last night and didn't wake up today that had plans for 3 o'clock this afternoon, right? So when I do go, I want to have lived that day to my fullest. And if I keep doing that, which I could go tomorrow and be satisfied with the life I've lived, right? And so, yes, there's a relationship to it. I'm ready for it. I'm not afraid of it. I put myself in situations where I could easily lose my life in service to someone else, that would cut short my relationship to my children, my friends, my loved ones. But I choose them to be something that would be worthy I've gone through and I've actually seen, not seen physically, but I went through an exercise where I saw myself on my deathbed, saw myself being buried. I saw everybody at my funeral, saw myself watching them after I was gone. And,
Wow.
and the greatest thing that I felt during that period of time was I wanted people to miss me, but to be gathered around telling stories of how much fun we had, right? And how much the jokes and the little things, like, not the trips and the houses and the cars and all that stuff. It would be the memories that we created together. And so I do my best every day, brother, to fill my days with joy, happiness, adventure, service, kindness. And it puts it into perspective that if you were going to die in an hour, would you be proud of this 60 minutes?
Wow. Jason, thank you very much for sharing your story. I truly appreciate it.
That's my pleasure, brother. And I just want everybody to know that's watching you. I told you before the show, you have been very persistent in getting me on your show. And I want everybody to know that I'm not an easy guy to get a hold of. And you're so committed to your show and to creating value for your listeners and your watchers. And you stick to your guns, and you're a very, very impressive young man. And I'm everybody should know that they should follow you. They should share your shows. They should do whatever it is to support you, because you're a man worthy of following.
Well, thank you very much.